In this episode, we're going to focus on a problem that every security team runs into, and that beginners often don't expect. Having alerts is not the same as having security. Alerts only help if someone can understand them quickly, trust them enough to act, and take the right action without breaking the business. In many environments, the alert stream is constant, and if it isn't managed well, it becomes background noise that everyone ignores, which is a dangerous place to be. Actionable alerts are the ones that arrive with the right context, represent a real risk, and lead naturally to a small set of sensible next steps. Non-actionable alerts are the ones that are vague, repetitive, low confidence, or so frequent that they crowd out everything else. Today, we'll build the beginner-friendly logic that turns an alert program from a noisy pile of messages into a decision system. We'll talk about prioritization factors, the most common ways alerting fails, and how false positive control is done without accidentally creating blind spots. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good way to begin is to separate alert volume from alert value, because more alerts can actually make you less safe. When humans receive too many signals, they start skimming, delaying, or ignoring, and attackers rely on that fatigue. Alert value comes from how well an alert answers basic questions right away, such as what happened, where it happened, who was involved, and why it matters. It also depends on whether the alert represents something you can actually influence, because an alert about a harmless background process may be technically accurate but operationally useless. Beginners sometimes assume that every alert should be investigated, but that's not realistic in large environments. And trying to do that often results in shallow investigation of everything and deep investigation of nothing. Actionability requires triage, which is the practice of deciding which alerts deserve immediate attention and which can be handled later or suppressed. The goal of triage is not to ignore threats, but to allocate limited time to the alerts that are most likely to represent real harm. When you understand alerting as a resource management problem, you can start designing it more intelligently. Prioritization factors are the ingredients that help you decide whether an alert matters now, matters later, or might not matter at all. One major factor is asset criticality, meaning how important the affected system is to the organization. An alert on a public-facing server that handles sensitive data is usually more urgent than the same alert on a disposable test machine, even if the technical detection is identical. Another factor is exposure, meaning whether the system is reachable from risky places or has broad connections that an attacker could use to move. Identity context is also critical, because an alert involving a privileged account is often more urgent than one involving a low-privilege user, especially if the activity is unusual. Timing and novelty matter too, because a new pattern that has never been seen before can represent an emerging threat, while a well-known routine pattern may need less immediate attention. Beginners should also consider confidence, meaning how likely the alert is to be true, because an alert that is highly confident but low impact might still be worth quick handling, while a low-confidence alert needs more context before you act. These factors combine into a practical decision. What is the probable risk if we act slowly, and what is the probable risk if we act quickly and are wrong? Another powerful prioritization factor is whether the alert indicates an attacker objective rather than just a suspicious symptom. Some alerts detect early hints like scanning, unusual logins, or suspicious downloads, while others detect actions that are closer to impact, like privilege changes, encryption of files, data exfiltration patterns, or tampering with security controls. Alerts tied to attacker objectives often deserve higher priority because they suggest the attacker is progressing beyond exploration. A beginner misconception is that the loudest alert is the most important alert, when in reality the most important alert can be quiet but meaningful, such as a single new administrator account created at an odd time. Correlation also affects prioritization, because one alert alone may be ambiguous, but the same alert combined with related signals can become urgent. For example, a login from a new location might be benign, but a login from a new location followed by a token use and a privileged action is a stronger threat story. Prioritization is therefore not just ranking alerts in a list. It is evaluating what the alert implies about attacker intent and potential damage. To make alerts actionable, you also need to understand the common failure modes that turn alerting into a liability. One failure mode is poor context, where the alert tells you something happened but not enough to investigate quickly, forcing analysts to spend time just figuring out what they're looking at. Another failure mode is inconsistent data, where the same activity appears differently across systems due to parsing issues or different naming conventions, making it hard to connect evidence. A third failure mode is over-alerting, where rules trigger on normal behavior and flood the queue, causing fatigue and distrust. Under-alerting is also a failure, but it is harder to see because it looks like calm, and calm can be misleading. Another failure is delayed alerts, where an event is detected hours later due to pipeline problems or retention constraints, which can make fast response impossible. Beginners should realize that alert failure is often a systems engineering problem, not a moral failure of analysts. If you design alerts that no one can act on, you don't have a team problem, you have a design problem. A frequent and painful failure pattern is the vague alert that lacks a clear reason why it was raised. If an alert says suspicious activity without specifying what was suspicious, the analyst is forced to reverse engineer the rule or search through large amounts of data to find the triggering behavior. This increases response time and creates inconsistent decisions because different analysts may interpret the same vague alert differently. Another failure pattern is the alert that lacks ownership, meaning no one is sure who should respond, especially when alerts touch both security and operations. If the alert requires changes to a system, but the system owner is unclear, the alert can linger while the attacker continues. Actionable alerts therefore often include routing, such as identifying the system, its owner, and the likely mitigation path. Beginners might not think of ownership as part of security, but it is, because response requires authority and coordination. An alert that cannot be acted on quickly because no one owns the system is effectively non-actionable. So part of building actionability is building the organizational pathway as well as the technical content. False positive control is the practice of reducing alerts that are technically triggered but not meaningful threats, and it is essential for keeping the alert stream usable. A false positive can be caused by a rule that is too broad, but it can also be caused by normal business activity that resembles malicious patterns. The goal is not to suppress everything that might be benign, because that can create blind spots, but to refine detection so the alert is raised only when it is likely to represent a real risk. Beginners sometimes assume false positive control means turning off rules, but safer approaches often involve adding context, adjusting thresholds, or narrowing the scope based on known good behavior. For example, if a rule triggers on administrative tools, you might refine it to focus on those tools being used on unusual hosts or by unusual accounts. If a rule triggers during scheduled maintenance, you might add time windows or maintenance tagging so the same behavior is treated differently when planned. False positive control is therefore an ongoing tuning exercise that depends on baselines and on understanding the environment's normal operations. When done well, it reduces fatigue and increases trust, which makes the remaining alerts more powerful. It's also important to recognize the danger on the other side, which is false negative creation, where tuning eliminates noise but accidentally eliminates detection of real threats. This often happens when people add broad exceptions, such as ignoring all activity from a certain server because it generates too many alerts, without understanding that the server could be compromised and then become a blind spot. A safer approach is to be specific and reversible, narrow rules carefully, document why, and monitor the effect. Beginners should learn to treat exceptions like debt, because each exception is a special case that must be remembered and reviewed, and attackers often exploit forgotten exceptions. Another way to reduce false positives safely is to move from single-signal detection to multi-signal detection, where an alert triggers only when multiple conditions are met. For example, you might require a suspicious process plus an unusual outbound connection plus a privileged account context. This reduces noise while maintaining sensitivity to meaningful sequences. The core idea is that the more your detection aligns with attacker behavior rather than generic anomalies, the more actionable it becomes. Actionability also depends on the response guidance attached to an alert, because even a high-confidence alert can lead to confusion if the next step is unclear. An actionable alert often implies a short set of investigative questions, such as whether the user's login is expected, whether the device is managed, and whether similar events occurred recently. It also implies possible containment actions, like isolating a host, resetting credentials, or blocking a destination, but those actions must be appropriate for the risk and the environment. Beginners should understand that response actions carry their own risk because shutting down a critical system can cause business harm. That is why many organizations create playbooks, meaning standard procedures for common alert types, so analysts can act consistently without reinventing the response each time. The playbook does not need to be complicated. It needs to be clear about what evidence matters and what actions are safe at each confidence level. Actionability is increased when the alert includes the context that playbooks expect, such as affected user, affected host, and related events. When alerts and playbooks match, response becomes faster and less error-prone. Another key ingredient in actionability is measurement, because you need to know whether your alerting program is improving or drifting. If you never measure, you might assume things are fine while analysts quietly ignore most alerts. Useful measures include the percentage of alerts that lead to meaningful investigation, the time to triage, the time to contain, and the ratio of true positives to false positives for key rules. Beginners sometimes hear metrics and assume it means judging people, but in alerting, metrics are primarily about judging the system. If a rule generates thousands of alerts and none are useful, that rule needs improvement or removal. If a rule rarely triggers but consistently catches real issues, it deserves careful protection and coverage. Measurement also helps guide tuning priorities, because you can focus on the rules that create the most pain or the most risk. Over time, a mature alert program becomes one where the queue is smaller but sharper, and where analysts can spend time on thinking rather than sorting. That maturity is built through feedback loops, not one-time configuration. It is also worth discussing the human side, because actionability depends on how people experience the alert stream. If the alert system cries wolf constantly, analysts develop alert fatigue, and the safest seeming behavior becomes ignoring alerts, which is dangerous. If the alert system is unpredictable, analysts lose trust and spend time double-checking everything, which slows response. If alerts are routed to the wrong people or lack clear ownership, they create frustration and delay. Beginners should recognize that building actionable alerts is partly about respecting human attention and designing for clarity. Clear naming, consistent severity, meaningful categorization, and good context can make the difference between a quick, confident triage and a long, confused search. Good systems also support escalation, so uncertain alerts can be moved to more experienced analysts without embarrassment or delay. When you design alerting with humans in mind, you build a program that can sustain itself under real pressure. To conclude, making alerts actionable is about turning detection into decisions, and decisions into safe, timely action. Prioritization factors like asset criticality, exposure, identity context, confidence, novelty, and attacker objective help you decide what matters most, while understanding alerting failures helps you fix the system rather than blaming the people. False positive control is essential for keeping attention available, but it must be done carefully to avoid creating blind spots, which is why specificity and multi-signal correlation are so valuable. Actionable alerts also need response guidance, ownership, and measurable feedback loops so the program improves over time. The defender's mindset is not to chase every alert, but to create an alert ecosystem where the most important signals are visible, trusted, and easy to act on. When that ecosystem is healthy, alerts become a force multiplier that helps small teams defend large environments. When it is unhealthy, alerts become noise, and noise is one of the attacker's favorite hiding places. By learning to engineer actionability, you make monitoring and response far more effective without needing to collect infinite data or hire infinite people.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.